Hello and welcome to another edition of Hash It Out. I'm Justin Moorhead. I'm here with my good buddy Mitchell Evans. We're happy to talk to you a little bit more about the sermon that was preached yesterday. So that's what we do here on Hash It Out, is we want to talk a little bit more in depth about the sermon that was most recently preached, just to consider implications, applications, just further nuggets of insight and inspiration for you all that are watching based on the passage. So what we'd encourage you to do first is to go listen to that sermon. So if you've not done that already, if you weren't able to be here with us yesterday, we've made a link to that video available in the description of this video. So please check it out. And the passage that we're going to be talking about today is Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 11, because this week we began our new sermon series through Nehemiah. Very excited about that. So to get things kicked off, the sermon itself began with a good question that I think would be helpful for us to even consider right now, that says, do you know someone who claims to be a Christian, but they are struggling? And what this passage is going to go on to help us see is how to come alongside a struggling Christian. So maybe, Mitch, let's think a little bit more about who this struggling Christian might be. What might that entail?
Yeah, I think in the passage is helpful. It's people who went back to Jerusalem. So they had all kind of been kicked out of their hometown, home city, home country, in fact. And now there's an opportunity over the past, by the time we get to Nehemiah, essentially 60 years or so, for people to have gone back, even over 60 years, in fact. To have gone back, very few took up that chance, right? Not a whole lot. Many thought, man, I've grown accustomed to the spot we're living now. I'm just going to stay here. Those that went back appear to have thought, when we go back, it's going to be awesome. And God's going to make this thing be this rock star experience. And then it doesn't transpire that way. Like, they have some wins, but they're small wins. And so I think that's really helpful for understanding what sparks Nehemiah's heart, because it would be a parallel to a lot of folks, I think. There's a kind of a general consensus I find many times. Somebody becomes a believer, or they make a real concerted effort to follow Christ in some way, and they think, I'm going to become a winner. Yeah. And then it doesn't transpire in the way that they thought. So for instance, I had a conversation with a lady who, she and her husband had agreed that for the time being, she would quit her job and stay home to raise her kids, young kids, and that they would just see God provide. And they would, so they did make some initial adjustments, cut some things out of their life to make it happen. Well, she, at that point, I would say was, several years into the process of raising her kids. They ended up having a couple more kids after that time. And so, long story short, she was saying, we're just really tight financially, and I feel like we can't do things for our kids like we might have been able to do if I'd kept a job. And so she was saying, I've thought, I'll quit my job, but my husband will see raises, we'll see all these other things. We will just really start winning. Yeah. And she said, it's been tight, and I feel like I'm struggling, and I feel like I don't know what God's doing. So I think there are a lot of people that kind of find themselves in that spot. I don't know if you've known anybody, maybe.
Oh, yeah, sure. And I think it sounds like disappointment. I mean, maybe that falls short of all of what could be imported into this type of struggle with somebody's faith. But if there's an expectation that wasn't quite right, I'm going to be a winner. You know, I'm going to win, and that's my expectation, that the impact that disappointment can have on someone's faith. I don't know, does that sound like close to the type of struggling Christian you would come with? Somebody who you think, man, they really are just unhappy with how life has dealt them, you know, or the Lord has dealt with them in life.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of warnings biblically that Jesus followed, obviously, more faithfully than anyone while he was here living as a person on earth, and his life didn't, quote, turn out, right? Yeah, I mean, he ended up being killed for his faith. And so I think that should be closer to our expectation. But for whatever reason, there is a pretty pervasive thought that if I follow Christ, things are going to even miraculously just kind of work out for me. And so I think even the person who is at work and takes a stand in some way for their faith, and then they're sitting there in their office realizing everybody else has gone to lunch and they've really been alienated.
Yeah.
And so they're struggling with that. This is not how I saw this going down. I thought people would kind of rally to my side, and there's even other Christians here, and they seem to want to keep their distance. So I do think what the group that Nehemiah opens with is this group that says, we went back. Sure. We thought God would do incredible things among his people. We're some of those who trusted him, and we went back and we wanted to do all the things, and it has not transpired nearly to the degree that we thought it would.
Yeah.
So much so that even when they do, those who went back rebuild the temple. And it says there was a mixed experience when the temple's rebuilt, in that some rejoiced, some were crying because it's not as glorious as it had been. And they're coming to terms with, we have gone back, we have been faithful. We thought it would really like explode into this incredible opportunity.
Yeah.
And we're still faithfully following God, and we're kind of chipping away at it.
Sure.
But it never had that moment. So I think that is really helpful. If somebody feels that way, to realize that's the group Nehemiah is written to, Nehemiah is addressing. So I think in the onset of this book, that can be really helpful just to identify more specifically who's being spoken to.
Oh, I think so. I think it'd be very helpful, especially for us to then go from there and think, okay, who in my life would fit this description? How could I come along somebody who seems to be perpetually disappointed and let down and try to build them up or support them? I mean, Nehemiah is, I can't remember what word you used, but he's grieved, he's pricked, he's affected by this. So something that even for me that was convicting is Nehemiah, it seems, is certainly bothered for these other people and the difficult position that they're in, as well as the Lord. I mean, he's, for the sake of God's reputation and God's glory and all that Jerusalem was supposed to be, and this idea of redemption, to have puttered out in such a way moves him in this where he needs to mourn and fast and pray. And I just thought, man, have I really been that burdened for somebody else who's kind of distant from me or from the Lord? Do you think that would probably be a common experience for Christians to think, well, I mean, really, I guess my own pain is typically the source of the majority of my grief, rather than other people or even for God's sake? Is that a problem? How if somebody feels that way, like similar to me, what do you do about that? What does that mean? I don't know.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is you don't necessarily relate to Nehemiah in that way.
I'm cold, Mitch.
Yes.
Just saying, man, I'm cold.
Yeah, if you're a cold-hearted person like Justin, what I would think, no, I think it is, there are people who are kind of more naturally sympathetic.
Yeah.
I think this is cultivated sympathy.
Okay.
And I think it's a very critical category for us to have, cultivated sympathy, because there are folks who are naturally sympathetic and they are grieved by things that should not grieve them. They hear some kind of tragic story among some person that they don't know, and they don't know all the events of it, but that's the nature of social media, is it kind of brings these things to our attention. And so they stay up late at night, being bothered by this situation. And perhaps
they give the money to the pets. The ASPCA,
yes,
that's who it is. They give to the kittens and Sarah McLachlan.
Yes, that's true.
Sorry.
Yeah, still trying to rescue that one dog. I think it's been the one dog in the cage the whole time. Maybe just lie to us at this point. It's been rescued. Yeah. You did it. So I think that is, though, Nehemiah. So Nehemiah is quizzing these guys who we don't know whether or not he sent them to get the report for how are folks doing in Jerusalem. I would say there's a lot of good evidence that was probably the case. He sent them.
Yeah.
At the same time, with him, once he gets word what's going on, he's really bothered by it. So the reason I would say we should cultivate our sympathy is don't give in to everybody who asks you for money and look at these poor pets and play on your heartstrings. However, say, God, I want to know how your people are doing. I want my concerns to be your concerns. There was kind of a pop Christian song, but it has the right sentiment that said, break my heart for what breaks yours.
Right.
So I think that sentiment is good. I don't recall whether the song was legitimate or not, but nonetheless, I think that is the right perspective. So I think don't take on everybody's grief.
Okay.
Is not a helpful disposition. At the same time, say, God, I want to have an eye for where you would be grieved, even to the point of inquiring about it like Nehemiah does.
Yeah.
I wonder how that church is doing.
Sure.
Is a really helpful thing to say. So I want to cultivate that.
So if we do that work, I'm genuinely curious in this. We investigate and think, what is God's heart tuned to? So what's going to bother him? And I want to be bothered by those same things. So if we investigate that and then we come up with our, okay, so these are the types of things I should be concerned with. How do you then actually cultivate that type of an affection? Do you think so my thought is, well, you just start doing first, and then that's going to inform your heart, and you'll actually have sympathies where they're appropriate. But kind of let action lead the way. So like once you've identified it right, start doing things to that end. Does that make sense? Am I on the right track?
It does. I think it very much does. I think 1 Corinthians 13 says, hope all things. That's an expression of love. Nehemiah seems to be very hopeful for how things are working out. So his initial inquiry is based in hope, I think.
Okay.
So if we say, man, I really hope things are going well, will lead us down this road, at least it leads Nehemiah down the road of being sympathetic when he finds out that his hopes were not met. That was not a expectation that was met. So I think that is a good route. So I want to be loving, hope all things for God's people and the things of God. And then I'm going to inquire about that. Then when it's not met, the other part of the cultivated sympathy is especially among guys, but I think it's among others. We think the best thing I can do is almost be stoic or strong for them, as opposed to saying I need to try to engage with them and feel what they're feeling. Yeah. That would be a good, right thing. And so I think he realizes, Nehemiah that is, that they're in this really desperate spot. And it just causes him to essentially get really desperate also, but he channels that back to God in prayer.
Sure, yeah. No, I think that's very helpful. One specific that was brought out on Sunday, and I think this would be fun to talk about, had to do with I think it was a stat about church attendance, that baby boomers, that generation, was falling away from the church, and that the Gen Z and other younger generations were kind of going upward. So if we're thinking about how do I come alongside someone whose maybe disappointment has led them away from the faith or to have a struggling faith, it would look like, kind of based on those stats in that comment, that you would have a younger generation needing to come alongside an older generation to help bring them up in the faith, which to me seems very backwards, and like that would be hard to do. So am I understanding the stat right? How do we do that? How do we come alongside an older generation if we're of a younger generation?
Yeah, I think you are understanding it right. This is Barna who put it out.
Barna.
It was just saying, how often in a month does somebody show up at church?
Okay.
So right now, Gen Z, which is late teens, 20s for sure, I don't know the exact category, but they are the most frequent in terms of occasions of attendance at church per month, followed by millennials.
Yeah.
And that is, you're exactly right. It was presented as these groups are growing in their church attendance, becoming more frequent in church attendance. Whereas, interestingly, by the time you get all the way down to boomers, so you go Gen X, all this stuff, but you get all the way down to boomers, boomers have the same church attendance and engagement as the elderly in our society. So those who are physically unable, and the boomers kind of mirror them, you would say boomers seemingly would be much more by choice.
Sure, yeah.
So I think you're exactly right. I think if the Gen Z were doing what Nehemiah does, inquire about your grandparents and where their faith is at.
Yeah.
Hoping they have a really good report. And then to say, where I don't find that, it's okay for it to break my heart. And then think I need to be praying for them.
Yeah.
That's Nehemiah's first couple of steps.
Sure.
So I think the inquiring is good.
Yeah.
I think it's just assumed.
Does that just look like hey, Grandpa, tell me about, I've been going to church. Tell me about your faith. Is it genuinely like inquiring in the simplest terms? Ask them about the Lord?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not less than that. Right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It might be more, for sure. But I don't think it's less than that. There are probably each one case by case, but I think more genuine questions are driven by specificity. And so, in as much as somebody knows their grandparent, tell me when did you become a believer, or even just how do you think God's still working in your life? So the answer is He's not. Would look a lot like the people Nehemiah is finding out.
Yeah.
Past 13 years, we don't feel like anything has happened.
Yeah. If this younger generation inquiring of an older generation is obviously asking about things that would be good and that would be hopeful and that would be even kind of morally on the up and up, how much of a hindrance do you think it would be for that older generation to think like, who are you to tell me or to inquire about my faith? Like that there would be a little bit of that. Does it seem like we're above our pay grade, inquiring about the kind of faith position of our grandparents? You know, do you think that would be much of a hurdle for a younger person to have to get past?
I would say you just take the advice of Paul. Paul tells Timothy, because Timothy's a young man, he says, when you address older men in the church, which you would say, certainly because it's your grandparents, address them as you would your father. So he's saying do so with a sense of deference and an attitude of respect. At the same time, he's not saying do not ever address them. So I think it is address them, certainly follow that prescript, do like you would your dad, very, kind of sincere approach. And so he's even given that admonition to Timothy with other people's grandparents.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's saying address all the folks in the room who might be older than you. So I think you're spot on. You don't want to be that punk, annoying son or grandson, granddaughter that gets blown off because of your approach.
Sure.
I bet my suspicion is if somebody's concerned for their grandparents' faith, that's the concern, not a jab about how often you go to church. Concern for their faith. The Holy Spirit is working in that person in such a way that they're also going to be inclined towards the right attitude with those questions. So I don't think it's asking them about their faith, not questioning their faith.
Oh, that's a good distinction. Yeah. Good.
I think it'd be a great starting place.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll all do that. For all you folks out there listening, that you guys will go inquire about the faith of others, and hopefully, truly, this is helpful to think about how to come alongside someone whose faith is struggling or who finds himself to be very disappointed. This would be helpful. We're really excited about preaching through Nehemiah as a church, and so in line with that, we're really excited to have these Hash It Out talks about Nehemiah. So hope you'll join us again next week for the next edition of this Nehemiah version of Hash It Out.